All right, so welcome back, everyone. My name is Lauren, and I'm a research intern at the Center for Community-Based Research.
Hi everyone, I'm Sherry and I'm a researcher at the Center for Community-Based Research.
So welcome to webinar number 3 of Evaluating Refugee Programs. It's a workshop in evaluation capacity building. So in webinar 1, Sherry and I discussed what evaluation is, the basics of community-based evaluation, and why community-based evaluation is important for refugee programs. Webinars 2 to 5 delve into the how of community-based evaluation. Webinar 2, which Jean and I led, was an introduction to phase number 1 of conducting an evaluation, which was all about laying the foundation. So in this webinar, we will look at phase 2 of conducting an evaluation, which is all about evaluation planning. So we often will say this at the beginning of all of our webinars. This webinar is part of a larger project that has a number of evaluation capacity building strategies. We invite you to check out our project website, evalforrefugee.ca, as there are a number of additional resources, which include primer videos, future workshops that will be offered across Canada, an outcomes inventory based on reports and literature in the refugee sector, additional evaluation resources, and online sites. The project is guided by a national advisory committee of practitioners, academics, networks, and people with lived refugee experience. In addition, we are in the process of developing a mentorship program, which includes a list of people that are interested and willing to mentor, coach, and work alongside refugee programs and evaluation, and a community-wide community of practice. That will be coming soon. So I'll hand it over to Sherry now.
Thanks, Lauren. So as we begin this webinar, let's quickly review what evaluation is. Evaluation is an organized approach to collecting information about activities, impacts, and effectiveness that helps to improve a program or organization and describe its accomplishments. So we often talk about community-based evaluation. So let's have a quick review on that. So community-based evaluation is important and different from other forms of evaluation. So what is different about it? It's stakeholder-driven, participatory in nature, and action-oriented. The aim of community-based evaluation is involving all the stakeholders in producing useful results for positive changes. There are 4 phases of community-based evaluation: laying the foundation, evaluation planning, information gathering analysis, and acting on findings. In our previous webinars, Lauren and Jean discussed laying the foundation in community-based evaluation. We will now move into phase 2, evaluation planning. In phase 2, we are going to work through determining the evaluation questions. Once we have established evaluation questions, this will lead to developing the methods for collecting information and developing a plan for how we will analyze the data that we collect.
In webinar number 2, Jean and I had you develop a purpose statement. So once you have that purpose, it will naturally flow into your evaluation questions. Evaluation questions are the questions that should be answered at the end of the evaluation. By answering these questions, you begin to fulfill the purpose. Community-based evaluation involves many stakeholder groups and a steering committee. One of the benefits of community-based evaluation is it increases the amount of voices we can use to create these questions. So I may come in as an expert evaluator with an idea of evaluation, but as I talk to so many others, I may realize that other questions are far more important. In developing your evaluation questions, you want to ensure that each question is linked to the purpose, and that it will fulfill the purpose, and that it reflects the interests of all stakeholders. The evaluation question might be related to project or program process, outcomes and/or future directions, and its contribution to increasing wellness and integration of refugee newcomers. So I don't know if you remember our previous webinar, Jean and I walked through the example of the Working Together project. So we're going to continue to use that. So as you can see in the slide in front of you, you can have various questions. You want questions that are open-ended and not closed-ended, meaning that it would be answered by just yes or no. So these are questions using the Working Together project example. So I invite you to pause the video now and just take some time to read each type of question. So you'll notice that these questions are slightly different depending on process, outcome, and developmental models. However, all these questions tie back to the purpose statement. I'm not sure if you remember, I can read off that statement just for your reference. So it was to create an ongoing evidence-based forum to inform and stimulate the Working Together project partners in order to develop innovative approaches to improving the vocational and language skills of refugees in the workplace. If you have the example of identifying and understanding gaps in a program, what questions would you ask? And what gaps exist? What is the consequence of the gap? How does it affect the client? And then how would these gaps negatively affect the outcomes? So those are a number of different questions. I invite you to take some more time to pause the video and just reflect on those questions. So when you're ready, we'll move into our first activity, which is going to be generating some evaluation questions. So I invite you again to please pause the video and answer the following questions. So first of all, what do you intend to understand with this evaluation? What might be 3 to 4 main questions that you want the evaluation to answer? How would answering these questions fulfill your evaluation's purpose? So while you're generating these questions, remember that for each question, always ask, how would answering this question fulfill your evaluation's purpose? Secondly, does this question reflect the priorities of stakeholders? And would this question provide information which can be acted upon to make improvements? And I'll pass it on to Sherry.
Thanks, Lauren. So now that you have determined your evaluation questions, we can move into the methods to collect information. Our evaluation questions will determine the type of methods we use. Ultimately, you want to choose the methods that are needed to answer the evaluation questions. When deciding on methods, first start by looking at the existing data. What information do you already have? Then ask yourself, how does this data help answer your main evaluation questions? Often, organizations will already have a method of data collection in place. If you can use that data to answer your evaluation questions, it will save your time, money, and resources. If your organization doesn't collect any data, or the data collected will not help answer your evaluation questions, you can then begin inquiring about new data. You must look to see if there are any gaps in the information you need to answer your main questions. What new data is needed in order to fill these gaps and better respond to your main questions? We would suggest you pause the video and take some time to reflect on these questions. In this slide, we are going to talk about the methods for data collection. The key to methods and data collection is that they should be driven by the evaluation questions. People imagine qualitative and quantitative as dichotomies. However, they both have different purposes and qualities that we can use. If we maximize the benefits of this, we can enhance the data. On this screen, you can see our methods menu, qualitative and quantitative ways of data collection. Quantitative data is concerned with numbers or quantities. Usually there are measurements associated with this data. This allows for breadth of understanding. On the other hand, qualitative data is concerned with narratives and is non-numerical in nature. Qualitative data is often investigating the lived experience of individuals. Both qualitative and quantitative data will provide rich information about the demographics you're collecting information on. In order to get the richest data, it's best to use multiple methods of data collection from multiple perspectives. In order to give you a better sense of what each of these methods of data collection contain, I brought up an example of one of our projects and the methods that we use to collect data. So in this working together project example, you can see the various forms of data collection we used. Data collection methods included client tracking tool, client case studies, client surveys, client focus groups, amongst others. So I invite you to pause the video and have a quick review on the details of these methods used to collect data in this specific project. All right, so it's time for activity number 2. At this time, please pause the video and answer the following questions. What methods will you use to answer your main evaluation questions? What are the best ways to answer your evaluation questions and capture different stakeholder perspectives? How do your methods work together to answer the main evaluation questions better than if they were conducted alone? In what order or stages should the methods be carried out? For those methods requiring you to recruit participants, how will you select people to be involved? For example, what are your sampling methods? How will you go about recruiting people? For example, what recruitment strategies will you have?
All right, so Sherry's just reviewed the types of data and collecting the data itself. So now I'm going to talk a bit about what we can do about that data once we have it, how to analyze it. So it's well advised to think ahead about how you will handle the data you will collect. So this is all before even collecting the data. So an analysis plan helps you discover where you have holes or gaps in your plan. And then part of this goes back to the data being collected and asking the question, is this data actually answering my question? Thinking about an analysis plan also helps you to keep on budget and timeline. As you plan for data analysis, you may realize that you're collecting more data than you can reasonably handle. So it's important to summarize the data that's being gathered in order to answer your main evaluation questions, and that is guided by the logic model. So some tips for the analysis plan include trust the original design and questions. Secondly, decide who will be involved in the data analysis. Build in flexibility, so leave time for reflection. And then assess the soundness of the analysis plan with the steering committee. The more eyes on something, the better the quality of what you're doing. This can be done easily with the steering committee. I do want to mention the downside of this is that it takes more time and it can be more difficult to resolve conflicts and come up with resolutions. However, the end product is much more useful because the people who are going to use it and are impacted by it are actually at the table. The final report should never be a surprise to anybody. Everyone should feel as if they've contributed a part to it. So by doing this third activity, we are encouraging you to make a data analysis plan for your evaluation. So again, we invite you to please pause the video in order to answer and reflect on the following questions. So generally speaking, how will you go about analyzing your data? Specifically, what strategies will you use to analyze qualitative data? So how will you prepare the data for analysis? That could look like transcribing or summarizing, looking at the notes that's being taken. Who will be involved in data analysis? Do you have the expertise on your team, or do you need external mentorship? And then what is the timeline for this data analysis? And then if you have quantitative data, what strategies will you use to analyze this? How will you prepare the data for analysis? So this could look like exporting to data analysis software, having someone come in to do data cleaning. And again, who will be involved in this data analysis? Do you have the expertise on your team, or do you need external mentorship? You'll notice there are very similar questions between quantitative and qualitative. And then, so what's the timeline for this quantitative data analysis? And then finally, it's always important to ask, how will you do analysis across those methods? So that's the end of our third webinar. To recap, we presented and discussed phase 2 of conducting an evaluation, which is evaluation planning. The phase is comprised of 3 steps, which are 1, determine the evaluation questions, 2, develop methods for collecting information, and 3, develop an analysis plan. Thanks very much for joining us on this third webinar, and we look forward to the next one.